Hey there guys, it's CyberUltra here. This morning, Nintendo finally announced the long-rumored Nintendo Switch Pro. People have been talking about getting something like this ever since the Switch was announced in 2017, but we finally got one. First, I'll go through all the details, and then I'll give you my thoughts. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and make sure to like the video. Here's everything you need to know about the Nintendo Switch OLED model. The first thing is the name, which is not the Nintendo Switch Pro or Switch Plus or anything like that. The console is simply Nintendo Switch OLED model. And the reason for that is because it isn't the Pro model many people were expecting, including myself. Instead, it's got some minor quality of life upgrades. The very first thing that it has is an OLED screen, so the colors will look a lot nicer. The screen is also bigger. Now it's a full 7-inch screen and the bezel is smaller, which is a really nice upgrade from the huge bezel on the regular Switch model. Another upgrade is the brand new built-in kickstand, which vastly improves over the original console's flimsy and weak kickstand. This one is pretty big, and the angles are adjustable, unlike the original. The console's storage has been upgraded from 32GB to 64. I'll give more detailed opinions on that later, but 64GB is way too little for a console releasing at the end of 2021. There's also an upgraded docking station, where the big difference is that they removed the inner USB port to make room for a built-in LAN port. Hopefully we can expect to see this with all Nintendo systems moving forward. The battery life of the console is the exact same as the Switch revision, which is 4.5 to 9 hours, depending on the intensity of the game you're playing. Another upgrade is the audio in handheld mode, which is enhanced to be better. Lastly, the release date and price. The Nintendo Switch OLED model releases on October 8th, the same day as Metroid Dread, and the price is $350 US. I'm Canadian, so the manufacturer's suggested retail price is $450 Canadian. There are two options for purchasing the system. Either you can get the brand new white Joy-Cons, or it can include the neon red and blue that have been available for the past 4 years. It'll be interesting to see if the Joy-Cons are better this time or if they're the same old, cheap and drifty ones we have right now. It'll most likely be the latter, considering Nintendo hasn't said anything about the Joy-Cons being upgraded. Pretty disappointing considering this has been a well-known issue throughout the entirety of the Switch's lifespan, and Nintendo still refuses to provide a genuine fix. Also, just as a side note before we move on, I'm extremely happy that a brand new Nintendo console, even if it's just a revision, is releasing alongside a Metroid game. I think it's pretty cool to see where the series has come to the point where now it's launching alongside a Nintendo console. Anyways, those are all the details you needed to know. Let's get into my opinions on everything. I personally think that there are multiple pros and cons. The first thing to bring up are the rumors. Bloomberg's reports on this console before it was announced were almost perfectly accurate. Except there's one massive difference. There are no upgraded specs in the Nintendo Switch OLED model. The rumors were all about how the console will have deep learning super sampling, which would allow the console to essentially upscale the games to 4K. There's more to it than that, but that's the general idea. Somehow, the incorrect information got mixed in with a bunch of mostly accurate reports from Bloomberg. I've seen lots of people disappointed in this, and that's fair. But also, lots of people had their expectations way too high from rumors when Nintendo had never promised a more powerful console. I think the big difference is what fans thought the console's purpose was versus what Nintendo's reasoning for releasing it is. Nintendo has positioned this as a slightly more expensive version of the same old Switch, but with some nicer features like an OLED screen. But this isn't the type of thing that a lot of people who already own a Switch are incentivized to upgrade to, but more so just an extra option for customers to have when deciding which Switch they want. Pay $50 extra for a nicer screen and a few extra quality of life features. But this is completely different from what many fans thought the Switch Pro would be. They thought it would be positioned as a more powerful console for already existing games to run better, as well as to allow more third-party games to come to the Switch, considering the Switch is pretty outdated and most third-party games are not able to run on the current model. There were multiple issues with going with this route, so I understand why Nintendo didn't go for it. Personally, I still wanted something more powerful, but here's why it makes sense Nintendo didn't. The biggest reason is that if it was more powerful, or powerful enough to allow more third-party support, it would split the player base. Some people would have access to certain games, while others wouldn't. Among regular people who aren't extremely informed Nintendo fans, this could get pretty confusing. Another thing is that an upgraded console wouldn't get exclusives because the majority of the install base is on regular Switch models. Developers wouldn't want to drop everything and create a port exclusive to the upgraded Switch when barely anyone will own it compared to the 85 million potential customers who own the regular Nintendo Switch or the Nintendo Switch Lite. Really, any game coming to the Switch would have to run on the base model, which kinda defeated the purpose of having something more powerful. Again, I personally want something more powerful, but if Nintendo really wants to make the Switch last without splitting the player base and creating confusion, it makes sense not to. We all know what happened when Nintendo had a confusing console with the Wii U, and I can imagine that they just want to keep things simple like they have right now. A Nintendo Switch Lite, a regular Nintendo Switch, as well as the Nintendo Switch OLED model with some upgrades. Okay, finally, enough with comparisons with a Switch Pro model that never existed. Let's get back to my thoughts on the current Nintendo Switch OLED model. I personally think that the kickstand is pretty nice, and I'm glad Nintendo finally added an Ethernet port to the dock. Hopefully all future hardware Nintendo releases will have Ethernet support built in. This is a standard, and I'm glad Nintendo's finally catching up, even if it's like 10 years way too late. OLED screens are beautiful, and I'm glad that the new model is getting one. The screen being 7 inches is also a nice upgrade. But the biggest disappointment in this console has to be the storage. I mean, come on, Nintendo. In 2021, they're releasing a console with 64 gigabytes of storage? On most consoles or PCs, that's not even enough storage to run a single game. I get that Switch games generally have better compression, but that's no excuse. They should have at least 500 gigabytes to a whole terabyte in this day and age, and it's ridiculous to see Nintendo still so far behind in this field. Other than that though, I think this is a smart move from Nintendo. I'm definitely disappointed that there's no brand new, must-buy hardware for people like me who already own the console, but this is good in terms of where Nintendo has positioned this, which is just another option for those looking to buy their very first Nintendo Switch console. Lots of fans are disappointed that it's not the giant upgrade we were hoping for, but ultimately, it's not built for people who already own a Switch. I'm sure there will still be Switch owners who upgrade, but it's not as many as it would be if it was a full-on Switch Pro upgrade that people were expecting. Anyways, that's all I've got for today's video. Let me know what you think of the brand new Nintendo Switch OLED model in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.